Welcome to the early signals for 2023, organized by the International Business Agility Institute. My name is Dr. Annika Steiber, and I'm the director of the Renan Hui Silicon Valley Research Center in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm going to start this webinar by giving just a small introduction about the International Institute, the Business Agility Institute, or what we call TIBAI. So, TIBAI have developed a business agility model that is pretty fascinating, that tackle comprehensively agility across all business perspectives, such as leadership, finance, processes, technology, supply chain, and services. This means that the business agility model allows the organization to firstly understand a probable future, and then to build agile capabilities, and finally to transfer your culture into towards more an agile culture, and the result would be speed and flexibility. TIBAI has two business lines. One is for organizational certificate, which also is combined with corporate membership. And here we have a number of partners. And then the second one is certified training program, which is combined with individual membership, also together with partners. The result is a positive impact on many aspects of your business. And the different levels that business agility model can categorize and rank your organizations are 4 business agility levels. It's a platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. And with that, I would like to go further to the focus of the webinar today. We have a very distinguished panel of 4 panelists. And here I have to sheet and read because it's tremendous, interesting bios of everyone. So we will start with Gary Bolles. He's a keynote speaker from the USA. He's an advisory board member for the International Business Agility Institute, TIBAI. He's also a global expert on the future of work, learning, and the organization. And he's the author of The Next Rules of Work, which I am sure you have been seeing and hopefully reading. He's an adjunct chair for the future work with the global virtual think tank Singularity University, and has 9 courses on LinkedIn Learning with a total of over 1 million learners, which is a fantastic number. Then going over to Dr. Mansoor Al-Awar. You are a keynote speaker from Dubai. He's the Chancellor of Hamdan bin Mohamed Smart University, member of the Executive Council of the Association of Arab Universities, chairman of the governing board of the UNESCO Institute for Information Technologies in Education, chair of jury for the Arab Government Excellence Award, chair of jury for the Egypt Government Excellence Award, chair of jury, Minister of Interior Excellence Award, since that has been launched since 2011, and then is also a judge for innovators under 35 years old, launched by the Dubai Future Foundation and MIT Technology Review Arabia. So it's extremely impressive bio, Dr. Mansoor. Going over to the next one is Dr. Irina Yashin Shaw. She's a keynote speaker and she's calling in from Australia, and I think it's like 1 a.m. in the night. So we're very honored to have her here. She's the managing director for Mega Agility Consulting Firm, an educator, author, and entrepreneur. She's the founder of the Global Entrepreneurs Institute and editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur magazine, with numerous publication to her name. Her most recent books are Entrepreneur, How Leaders Ignite Innovation, Break Bureaucracy, Catalyze Change, and Leading in the Innovation Age. Unleash knowledge, talent, and experience to create an innovative workplace, which is, of course, dear to my heart. So finally, I'm also an author. I'm also an investor in tech startup here in Silicon Valley, and I'm an executive at the Rananoe Silicon Valley Research Center. I have spent 3 decades trying to chase the quest to understand how management of the firm is evolving over time with the digital technology, and also now with sustainability. My latest book was published this year. It's called Leadership for Digital World and the Transformation of GE Appliances. And the center the Silicon Valley Research Center was founded in 2020 and offers next generation webinar, certificate courses, and corporate programs to forward-looking business leaders all over the world. And we have a number of courses coming up this fall. So with that, we are coming over to the next section of this webinar, which is the key section, one of the key sections. We're now going to have 10 minutes of presentation from each of the keynote speakers. We will start with Gary Bolles, that will focus specifically on the early signals and trends. And then we will continue with Dr. Mansoor Al-Awar, that will focus on the educational sector. Then we will have me coming up talking about management of the firm. And then we will end with Dr. Irina Yashin-Shaw, that will go into more of the future need and escalating need for entrepreneurship and agile leadership. So with that, I would like to stop sharing my screen and allow Gary up on stage.
Wonderful, thank you. So thank you for the marvelous introduction. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I know we have an opportunity to discuss a lot of these ideas that we're talking about during the questions and answer period, and I hope each of you who are watching, you're preparing questions as you watch each of the presentations. So I'm just going to jump right into it and offer a couple of thoughts about just how to think about the need for early signals. We're at this point where we're more than halfway through 2022, a unique year in modern human history. And 23 is probably going to be no different in being unique. And so it's helpful at this time to start to think about some of the ways to be able to understand the seismic changes that are affecting our world. And especially a lot of my focus is how to help people to think about what's coming next. So when we think about early signals, we think about this idea of trying to sense some of the trends and some of the changes that might affect our countries, our organizations, our communities, our lives. There's a great article in the New York Times just a couple of days ago by Kyla Scanlon, and a quote from her is, economic indicators, these things that we try to sense what's happening well in advance, they're kind of like a Jackson Pollock painting. There's all these data points and trends, and we're trying to tease these threads out to try to see what actually is relevant and what actually could have impact on us as individuals, communities, organizations, and countries and regions. And so I tend to suggest we think about separating this into the problem domain and the solutions domain. These are unique times. We have this rapid change that's continually impacting us. We've had a global pandemic. We're having geopolitical events. They're having ripple effects throughout the world. And so as our friend John Hagel calls these are big shifts. Often what I call a great reset is having ripple effects through so many of the different aspects of our industries and our lives. But disruptive technologies can also have an impact, the changing demographics of the world and the changing planet. And so then the ripple effects, those impacts, often it's a tremendous amount of economic uncertainty. If we had been talking about the early signals in December of 2019, 3 months later, we would have all been completely wrong about what we thought was going to be happening in economies around the world. And so these ripple effects then result in things like market mismatches, where there's a supply of talented people over here and there's a demand over here and they're not well matched up. Fractured supply chains, as we saw through the recovery from the pandemic, and then societal change. So all of these impacts, these are overlapping waves, as if more and more pebbles are being thrown into the lake and interacting with each other. So the challenge for us as humans is that we tend to think linearly. We see a series of events and we project those events into a linear future, but change can happen exponentially. This is actually a mindset that the co-founders of Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, have been suggesting for quite some time, is that these technologies, disruptive events, an exponential curve that most people in their lives, they experience an exponential curve when they saw the infection rates of the early days of the virus. And so we need early signals because our minds are thinking linearly, but change can happen in many cases exponentially, and we're really not mentally prepared. So we try to understand how these changes are occurring at some of the early signals, so we can start to build scenarios in our minds and determine how we can prepare for those various scenarios. Just to give you an example, back in March of 2020, I hope you all remember that time. It seems in the distant future right now, but my group, Charette, we did an analysis of previous resets, like the Great Recession, and we realized that they tend to have three phases: a falling off the cliff phase of almost complete uncertainty, a riffling along the bottom phase that's like a fever chart or a heartbeat, of turning the lights back on again. Oh no, the Omicron variant is here. Turn the lights back off again. And then finally, hopefully, a building back, or as we like to say in the US, building back better, period where we can actually start to assemble the knowledge and learnings we've had from the previous times and then start to anticipate the next wave of change. So just like the map at Disneyland that shows where you are, this is where we are together right now. We are co-creating the rules for the next phases, and we're all trying to understand what those early signals are that can help us to be able to anticipate this range of changes that can have an impact on us. And so I tend to, because these can be very, very complicated issues, I tend to frequently talk about 4 domains of exponential change: how it affects us as individuals, how it affects us as organizations, how it affects us as communities, and how it affects us as countries. And I think we're each going to be taking some different facet of this diamond as we're talking about these early signals. But just to set the table a little bit, I'm going to talk about, well, first, the problem domain in work markets. You think of it as supply and demand. You think of it as a mishmash of conflicting signals. There are historic job openings, especially here in the United States, but also a historic number of resignations. There's a mismatch in the demand for skills in marketplaces and the skills that people often have. Automation is creating exponential change in some industries, disruptive change in some industries, and increasingly now in hopefully what will become a post-pandemic era, we're going to focus more and more on human well-being. And all of those, with the relentless march of time, it's this oscillation of supply and demand in work markets that creates a substantial amount of disruption. Well, the same thing is happening in education, and Dr. Mansoor will guide us through this, but the same impacts on human work, many of the same underpinnings of becoming unbundled, of becoming more distributed and remote, changing business models. All of these ripple effects have also had an impact on the world of learning and education. When it comes to the firm, when it comes to the organization, again, disruptive change. Many organizations have had to become extraordinarily agile in a time when they didn't even know that the virus was going to change the way that they functioned, the way they operated. And some organizations were able to almost shrug off the shift to a much more distributed world, and others are still attempting to figure out how they can manage in this much more flexible world of work. And then all of that happens against the backdrop of countries, regions, socioeconomic conditions. And what happens with us as humans, because we think linearly, but change can happen exponentially, is that there's continuing uncertainty. There are what Nassim Taleb calls black swan events. Today it's a virus, tomorrow it's, I don't know, a war in a country that has ripple effects throughout the world. We know how interdependent we have all become, and then our planet is changing. And so all of those are the backdrop against which so much of this change can happen. So now let's start thinking about how to manage these early signals. How do you actually apply these in your world? Well, I'm a big fan of magic quadrants. There are, on the left side, black swan events and white swan events. White swan events are the ones we can pretty much anticipate. It's pretty predictable what change can look like in your industry. And then along come black swan events, a massive disruptor or some geopolitical or health impact. And then change can happen in a very linear fashion. It can be industries and governments that are somewhat insulated, or it can be exponential change. A disruptor comes in and completely changes the rules for how your industry functions. So obviously, we want to prepare scenarios for each of these different quadrants. You want to be able to think about continually how change can impact. But it's especially the black swan events, the events we didn't know were going to happen. We only knew that there would be a black swan event. And exponential change are the ones that we often don't plan for. And so that's where I think one of the takeaways for today, I'm going to urge you to be listening to the various speakers and be thinking about how you can be prepared for each of these different scenarios, but especially if your industry, your arena, your region was impacted by exponential change and unanticipated events. How would you as an organization continually be agile and nimble? So I mentioned I was going to talk specifically about work. Just briefly, we know that there is a brave new world of work. We know that we, throughout the world, are embracing flexible work. We have to continually develop skills and leverage automation so we can help people to develop the superpowers for solving the problems of today and tomorrow. The workplace has to be completely reimagined to become more inviting and collaborative and even, I don't know, fun. We have to change how we manage and how we lead. I know this is what Irina and Annika are going to be diving into. We have to become more diverse, equitable, and inclusive in our organizations. And then finally, one of the ways to deal with these early signals is to not think of it as an answer. You don't need an answer to how to deal with these exponential changes. You need a process. You need a co-creation process with your workers and other stakeholders so that you can continually be agile and adaptive in a world of exponential change. So I'm going to stop there. The whole mindset, I think, is how we think about what is coming next. And what's coming next after me is Dr. Mansoor to talk about these impacts in the world of education.
Excellent. So Dr. Mansoor, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this invitation, and really appreciate the part of this panel. I'm going to, in this introduction, I just to put kind of question to this as well. The way that I have structured to set the floor for advancing the thinking. Early signals of 2023. In this brief talk, I would like to warn against the occurrence of a major action that I see hovering over the horizon currently, about to fall over our head. I think it's a fortunate in a way. I'm not going to say fortunate in that sense of optimism, but I think fortunate because we can predict, because we're going just to be able to touch signs for it. Unlike the pandemic COVID-19, which happened all of a sudden. When I talk about these two concepts, it's a concept and its effect on education specifically. So if it falls, I think what is coming up, it casts heavy shadows, ladies and gentlemen, over all aspects of life and leaves worldwide repercussions from which no one will escape. By major action, I foresee somehow very big signals in terms of World War III, this has been in the atmosphere filtered. By worldwide repercussions, I mean the negative effects on education. So when a journalist actually asked Albert Einstein after the end of World War II and the mass destruction that followed after the first use of the nuclear bomb, what kind of weapons? They asked him, the journalist asked Einstein, what kind of weapons is expected to be used in the World War III? Einstein said, and I like his quote, I don't know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with the sticks and stones. And I think this particular say of Einstein will a little bit give us a little bit of alarm in field of education, what needs to be done, because the current circumstances actually in the light, I mean, the wars in the region, the instability in different parts of the world, are we on the verge of the Third World War? The answer is that we are most likely on the verge, and also there are evidence into this. I don't want to go into the evidence. And the second, of course, is the circumstances where the world's second war. Let's take a quick look at the circumstances of the outbreak of the war, in which very similar to those of the outbreaks of the current war between specific certain countries. On July, I think 7th in 1937, the Empire of Japan invaded the Republic of China due to some border issues. It was a full-scale invasion, which often regarded as the real beginning of the Second World War. And here are the important, I think, question arises. What prevents the current war between countries from turning into a Third World War, in which many countries of the world join, each supporting one of the two warring countries, regardless of whether or not you agree with me on this proposition, or about the percentage of possibility that the current war will turn into a world war, we must be prepared to face this possibility, I would say. Since my first concern is education, I will raise the following question. Can education be suspended if World War III breaks out? The answer is yes, and I don't think it will be so. Then how many years education will continue to be suspended? And we know that the World War continues for several years. And I think the first war, it was 1914 till 18, and then the second from 39 to 45, 1900. We can say it is not acceptable to get education suspended for several years. Then the second question, are the students allowed to go to school as usual despite the ongoing war? The answer is emphatic, no. So by analysis, the situation, we can draw the following conclusions, I would say. The education process cannot be suspended for the duration of the war. Second, it is not acceptable to allow students to go to school during war and their lives are in danger. Three, hence, the truly unacceptable education is the education received at school. So the final conclusion on which there is no disagreement is the following, I would say. Education must continue, but the school attendance must be suspended. Now, the critical question, the most critical question now arises is, how can education continue while suspending a student from going to school? The only reasonable answer, I would say, that imposes itself on this question is that education should be done via electronic media, which we call online education. And I think maybe through the discussion would put some, shed light on what we have the experience of this issue. And I would conclude my introduction by a final question, the question that should be answered by those interested in education everywhere in the world is, what measures and arrangements we have to take to ensure the continuation of education while students don't go to school? If the Third world war breaks out, a war whose will be very serious based on the highly sophisticated weapon systems available now. In addition to what Einstein alluded actually to his smart answer I presented at the very beginning. And I think what I'm raising the questions is here, ladies and gentlemen, is not to replicate what has happened in terms of education during the pandemic for the last 2 years, because people, they got fascinated with technology, but however, they didn't have a clue how to be able to implement that technology in terms of the real life. There are very, very few institutions around the world who've been successfully dealing with this aspect of online education. So I think that's a question I would definitely shed light on while the discussion is going on. So I think we need to be ready. This is not going to be an easy thing. This needs, in field of education, a total transformational thinking. And I would call it the 3 T's, because unless educators around the world will go a little bit, there are reluctancy actually to go to online education. And of course, the COVID brought up this issue, but still educators are in dilemma, I would call it, regarding the quality and other things to beside that. So by this, I conclude my introduction. I think we need to be ready. The signals are there. Are our education institutions on higher education and general education are ready? Because there were a UNESCO report, of course, being published a few months ago about the loss of education during the pandemic over the last 2 years around the world. So I think that's the signals that I would say education institutions and educators must be ready for those type of segments. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an extremely important topic that you bring up. And as a mom, I'm in the middle of this and really worried about my own kids and their higher education, specifically higher education in the future. So we are coming back to that in the discussion. But before that, I'm going to share the screen, and I'm now going to dive into management of the firm. So now we go from the overall signals and trends from educational sector more towards the business sector, or the management of the firm or management of the organization. And I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts. So here, I choose the title to be Management for the Internet of Thing Era. And I think we all can agree that the world has changed, no doubt about it. If you compare 100 years ago from now, it's very different. And one of the drivers, of course, digital technology, and it's going fast. And we now fronting AI and even more big data and cloud and all the others coming, which will change it even more. The problem is that organizations usually are still using the old way of managing the firm. In fact, they use management innovations that was born in the 1900s, and we can refer many of the current practice back to in the beginning of the 1900s. So Gary Hamel, already in 2009, of course, said that equipping organizations to tackle this future would require a management revolution. So we have been, and I would say we are passing through a total shift in management of the firm. There are 3 very important questions that need to be answered in this new economy. And they need to be answered by every executive out there and also the board of directors. And I don't think many of those have actually answered those questions. One is that in an age of change, how do you be fast and adaptable as well as focused and efficient? So you need to be pretty paradoxical and schizophrenic in your way of leading the firm. The other one is in the innovation economy, how do you innovate quickly and boldly enough to stay relevant? So here we don't talk about incremental innovation that most organizations are focused on, but how do you actually be able to disrupt yourself over and over and over again? and with decreasing span of time between those disruptive events, as we heard before. And then finally, we have in a creative economy, how do you inspire employees to bring initiatives and ideas and passion, which I think we will hear more about from Irina as well. So if you answer those three questions, you most probably will have an organizational model and management model and a leadership and a culture and everything that is under management that will fit the current economy better than what we had before. The good thing is, or the current or identified signals, is that many organizations have already developed this model. It's actually out there, it's applied, and you can almost say that it was born in the beginning of 2000, and then it has continued to evolve because management innovation, exactly as technology innovation, is evolving over time. So we have a number of companies that have been already developed a new model, the Google way, for example, and Amazon, we all know about, the Swedish Spotify, but also the Chinese Tencent, Alibaba, Xiaomi, and also the company Hire. So what I'm going to tell you about now is mostly coded in my books, and those are 4 of the 11 books that I've written, and they are meant to be read as a series of books where you can take get more detailed information about everything. So if we go to early signals, I will say that the early signal is now that we are not just seeing the new generation of firms coming out with a new model. We see that established firms now start to successfully transform. And we have a number of examples out there in the world that have transformed themselves. This is one company, it's Hire, it's a Chinese company. They are valued 3.5 times more than Whirlpool Corporation, the American version. So Hire is valued to 35 billion right now. As you can see, something happened with their share price development around 2012. And what happened was that they, at that point in time, implemented a whole new management model. And I'm going to explain a little bit how that works. So Hire's CEO and chair, Shang Ruman, got some key insights already actually in 2000 when he went to the World Economic Forum. And those insights became what he then later called Ren Dan Hu Yi, which is their model, this new management model. The first one was that we have to embrace internet. And it's not only to embrace internet as a technology, but embrace internet in your organizational design. Organizational units should be like a node on internet, which also gave birth to the networked organization. So it's a focus on decentralizing and flatten out the organization to be much more agile, much more speedy, and also empower people that have entrepreneurial skill set and to be able to actually fulfill the own value, which is the culture. So fulfilling their own value means that if you are having an entrepreneurial idea, you should be able to fulfill that own value and also actually get wealth. So wealth distribution as part of that. You should also be able to get wealth out of that increase. The third one was technology innovation to create new demand and market. So embrace technology innovation as the very base for creating new demands and market. And then the fourth one was people, that everyone should be encouraged to innovate. And as I said before, if they have the possibility to actually become an entrepreneur, they should also be having the possibility to fulfill their own value. REN stands for people or the employee. Dan stands for focus on the user value. So it's a user and user value. And HOYI is to combine the people with the user and user value. And one of these things is to create aligned organizational structure. So you focus on the user and the market, and also the wealth distribution, as I mentioned, that everyone gets part of the share of the wealth that is produced. So the Renan-Hoey model, as an example, focus on 6 different components. And those are something that I've seen in other companies as well. For example, the Google model, the Facebook model, or the Tesla model. So one is that you embrace the ecosystem. So we go from an enterprise, a closed enterprise, to an enterprise without boundaries that is co-creating together with partners. And you do this upstream and downstream. So upstream for innovation, and downstream for to capture an increased share of user needs. Next, the micro enterprise structure. So in order to go towards more of a networked organization, they have created something they call micro enterprises, which is more or less independent business units. And they want every employee to belong to one of those micro enterprises. And they are usually smaller, and they are fast moving and very agile. And their focus is 100% on the market and user needs. Employees are expected that everyone becomes an entrepreneur. There is no employees anymore. In fact, they don't even use the word employees anymore. It's gone. They call them makers or entrepreneurs. You can be a founder of one of those micro enterprises, or you can work in a micro enterprise, then you are a maker. And then fourth, customer. It's not enough with customer focus anymore. You need to have zero distance to users. With digital technology, you can co-create to users, you can have contact with users more or less frequently, daily. And that is also disrupting and changing your business model. Compensation-wise, we go from the enterprise pay to pay by user. So more of the compensation model is based on the value you actually create. And then the leadership is going towards non-linear, which could be translated into more of a servant leadership, more a supporting and coaching leadership in order to be able to create exponential growth. So in order to create these excellent teams and allow growth in the company. GEA Appliances is another transformer that stated that they were slowly dying in 2016. They were very traditionally organized, focused on internal focus and cost control. They had a very risk-averse culture and very bureaucratic organization. They adopted the Renan-Hoey model, and they did a total change in only 5 years. They did a total change where they changed the principle of the management from corporation to become and see themselves as a platform. And on this platform, they create new businesses all the time. They went from 4 businesses to 14 now. And from that, of course, they have much more growth. They go from a hierarchy to a network organization. So they have created micro enterprises and supporting platforms. So manufacturing and other operational functions usually become platforms serving and supporting the market focus units. Management is now changed to non-linear leadership, supporting the leaders that have been empowered by much more decision making. And actually they have the 3 rights. So the right of setting the strategy, right of hiring and firing people, and the right of distributing the wealth within their unit. Employees are becoming entrepreneurs, and they are expected to become entrepreneurs. And pay by enterprise is more now towards pay by users. They have changed the bonus system, so it's much more reflecting the actual value that each business unit have created, and also the people that have been involved in the business unit. And the firm is now starting to become more of a win-win ecosystem. And this is the final phase they're working on right now. The success factors for GE Appliances have been a change, a total transformation of the leadership, where the CEO had gone from central control to enable what they call micro enterprise leaders. And the micro enterprise leaders had gone from order followers to empowered leaders. The organization had gone from product lines and functions who competed with each other about resources to micro enterprise platform collaboration. The culture have been going from have now a leading goal that they want to win, not just to sort of minimize the risk of decreasing the profitability and cash flow, which was the focus initially, but also to win in the market. And the culture has been now transferred into accountability, very proactive communication and transparency between everyone in the firm, so they are more as a team. And the alignment is done by light contracts and broad weekly C communication and connect rewards to result. The result from both of those companies is pretty amazing. I showed you before the share price development of higher for GA, which is not listed on the stock exchange. The growth have been tremendous. They are now the fastest growing appliance company in the US. They won the Smart Home Appliance Company for 4 consecutive years, and they are certified as the best place to work by its own employees. So with that, I want to conclude and say that the early signals is now that the new model of management of the firm, I think, is here to stay. And we have plenty of examples today. I just took 2 where we can actually learn about this new model and how to transform your own organization towards that. So with that, I would like to thank you and let Irina Yashin-Shaw come in.
Thank you very much, Annika, for that really insightful presentation. There was some very interesting research that you shared with us all, and there will be resonance through my presentation that will pick up on some of those concepts. I just wanted to start by saying that Winston Churchill once upon a time famously said, and I paraphrase, "If you want me to speak for an hour, I'm ready to do it now, but if you want me to speak for 2 minutes, it will take me 2 to 3 weeks to prepare." And so when I was preparing this 10-minute presentation on a topic as huge as the shift in leadership, I felt very much the same way. And I applaud my esteemed colleagues for the wisdom that they've been able to distill in such a short time. So let's get started and dive in. In a VUCA world, and VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which is often how our world is described these days. So in a VUCA world, characterized by disruption and crisis and change and transition, this is when we need good leadership more than ever. Now, not only is 21st century leadership different to 20th century leadership, but 2023 leadership is different to 2019 leadership. And the world, because the world has shifted so much in the last couple of years as a result of the pandemic. So our new world needs a new kind of leader. And I'm referring to this as the intrapreneurial leader. So I'm going to bring the educator's perspective to the shift in leadership and identify 7 practices that characterize the way the leader of the new world behaves and practices, as opposed to sort of more traditional leadership styles, which were based on positional power and top-down approaches to decision making. So the 7 practices that I'm going to just go through on a very high level, very briefly, in fact, form the acronym EDUCATE. And so here is a snapshot of the intrapreneurial leader. So first of all, being entrepreneurial means identifying opportunities for creating value for customers, for the organization, for the entire ecosystem that is associated with an organization. But the key thing is that it is for the intention of improving the fortunes of the company, of the firm. It's also about being prepared to take calculated risks in that pursuit, and importantly, being able to inspire people with bold and exciting visions that are very clearly aligned to the company's goals. So secondly, democratization. Now this is about distributed decision making, and it's about empowering people, including those that don't have a formal title, empowering them with the remit to make decisions. And this requires leaders to be prepared to relinquish control and lead from the middle instead of from the top. And leaders who can do this give people a sense of agency and purpose and autonomy, which is what people crave in their work. And that in turn increases buy-in, loyalty, support, and engagement from employees. Now, this kind of approach to leadership provides people with the opportunity to develop their leadership skills no matter what level of the organization they're at or no matter what position that they hold. So number 3, utilization. This means tapping into the talents and the skills and the knowledge and experience that resides in team members right across the organization in order to release the potential that is currently locked up within so many of our institutions. So this could take the form of something like job crafting, where individuals redesign their roles, where they are able to then better align their job with their passions and with their aspirations, and that ultimately creates more satisfying and fulfilling work. Now, I think organizations don't actually have a talent shortage. We hear a lot about that at the moment. I think they have an elasticity shortage. In other words, there isn't enough being done to encourage and support people to stretch into new roles and acquire new skills. And people are actually looking for organizations that will enable their skill development. And the organization that does this will also have a more agile workforce. So it also means making the most of the diversity that organizations have within their teams, and that's both inherent diversity and acquired diversity. Now, we often hear a lot about inherent diversity, which is what most people think of when they hear the term diversity, because that's referring to the inborn traits such as age and ethnicity, etc. But less well considered are the elements of acquired diversity through such as, for example, things that we bring to our job that might be outside of our specific professional life. It might be our unconventional career path. It could be previous clients, foreign work experience, travel, study, both formal and informal, even hobbies and non-related work skills. And the research suggests that teams that have a mix of both inherent and acquired diversity are the most productive. But the real takeaway from this point is that organizations largely have the resources that they need to address their most pressing challenges already within their ranks. They just need to find effective ways of tapping into them and utilizing that talent. So the 4th practice is creativity. Now, I'm just going to redefine the notion of creativity here. In its broadest sense, it's really about cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to shift among different kinds of thinking and different domains of knowledge easily and fluidly. Now, this might be a somewhat different conceptualization of creativity, which is usually described as, out-of-the-box thinking. But let's take a deeper dive into this. So having cognitive flexibility gives leaders the ability to transcend rigid mental models in order to see and think in new ways, which in turn enables them to solve problems in new ways. This also promotes multidisciplinarity and intellectual boundary crossing, which is really essential and important for solving complex problems that require non-linear thinking. So it enables leaders to adapt and respond quickly and appropriately to constantly shifting circumstances without becoming overwhelmed. And it also enables leaders to be mentally agile and adaptive thinkers who can flourish in an exponential and quantum super VUCA kind of a world that we live in. So the 5th practice is agile adaptation. And that is characterized by, first of all, change agility, which is the ability to anticipate and adapt quickly to shifting circumstances. Also by learning agility, which is the ability to acquire new knowledge and skills as and when we need them. So essentially, it's about being a lifelong learner, and increasingly important in a world where people are going to have much longer working lives than in the past, where the half-life of knowledge is rapidly shrinking. It's not inconceivable that in the foreseeable future, people might have 100-year careers. So we need lifelong learning to keep us relevant across that kind of a time span. And it's also about being able to pivot elegantly. So agile adapters are responsive enough to shift direction very quickly by taking on board new information, new data, new or unexpected results from experiments or from customer feedback. Now, this is an area that TIBAI addresses with its wide suite of tools to help organizations to be more agile on a worldwide basis. And if you wanted to find out more about that, please visit the TIBAI website for a deep dive into all things agility. So number 6 is thinking strategically. So this is a practice that enables leaders to see the bigger picture and to avoid short-termism, which enables leaders to then create business with a conscience, to understand the impact of the decisions across the planet, not just for the here and now, but to take a bigger perspective on things. It helps them to therefore make more ethical decisions and create a future that works for everyone. It also facilitates proactive rather than reactive action. So it stops people from living in crisis mode all the time, or as we say in Australia, constantly putting out bushfires. And it gives leaders the headspace to find new and interesting ways of deploying and utilizing the skills within their teams. And finally, engagement. Now, this is really the holy grail of leadership, and every year we see the global reports that show the same statistics that, only 30% of employees are engaged, depending on which report you read, because some of them say that it's much less. And in a world of hybrid and distributed teams, work from home, the Great Resignation, at a time when the social contract between employees and organizations is literally being rewritten right now, this issue is more relevant than ever, and intrapreneurialism has some solutions. So there is an emerging area of study globally. So it's still new and it's attracting a lot of attention, but already there is a growing body of rigorous academic research that shows that there's a positive correlation between entrepreneurship and work engagement, between entrepreneurship and employee well-being, and intrapreneurship and personal satisfaction. And we shouldn't really be too surprised by all of that, because there is joy and fulfillment in being able to use one's creativity and one's skills to solve problems that improve the fortunes of one's organization as well as people's lives. And that's what entrepreneurs do. So the entrepreneurial leader is one who practices these 7 principles of educate. So such entrepreneurial leaders build and breed an entrepreneurial culture, which in turn creates entrepreneurial employees who will bring the next wave of ethical and sustainable productivity and economic development. Now, in this context, disruption goes from a word that literally strikes fear in the hearts of leaders to being seen as a stepping stone to a better future. And disruption is actually going to be the new driver of the new world economy. And intrapreneurs have a key role to play in this. But in order for that to happen, organizations need to become more intentional about developing the intrapreneurial skills at scale across their workforce, because this is the new professional and transferable skill set of the 21st century, which will enable organizations to be agile and robust. Now, I haven't really talked about those skills in this presentation. You know, what are the skills and the skill set of an entrepreneur, because I've really focused on the leadership skills. But if you go to the website on the screen, gii.certificate.com, you'll be able to find out a little bit more about that. So I'm talking about upskilling not just leaders, but the broader workforce into entrepreneurialism in various incarnations. Currently, these skills are developed rather incidentally rather than intentionally. So people tend to just pick them up as a result of their general experience and professional growth. But the development of these skills can be accelerated through widespread workplace education that teaches these skills explicitly and formally. And that way, organizations can build entrepreneurial capacity quickly across the organization. At the moment, it's just the early adopters who are doing this right now. And so I would say that that is definitely a signal, an early signal for what's going to be happening in 2023. And so at that point, I'll hand back to you, Annika.
Thank you. And it's time for a discussion. Then we will also let you all come in with questions, and we need to have time for that. And then I plan to do a small ending conclusion by having all of the panelists give one main thing that you want to sort of send with the participants, one key takeaway from this as a conclusion. But why don't we start with an excellent question that I have, but it's also one of the participants that have these questions. So I will sneak into that immediately. And this is how will organizations seize opportunities for early signals such as Great Reset and new demographics? And this is for Gary. And I asked the same. I actually had it on my list. So why don't we start there? How can organizations just become better to seize all those signals and act on them?
So I think each of us have talked about some different facet of the diamond of how we are trying to basically channel the energies of talented human beings to create value for the organization stakeholders. So if that's sort of what the firm is, it's a framework or a platform where humans are channeling their energies to create this value. And I think it's been very clear from your talk, Annika, from Irina, the nature of the firm, the way we think about an organization is changing. So one of the opportunities is I call this sort of opening the aperture or softening the walls of the organization. The more you can think of the talented humans that you are channeling to create that value for your organization stakeholders, the more you can think of that as a broader range of people. It's not just this sort of box of, people that are employees and then nobody else, but actually there's a range of different work roles, a range of different ways that organizations are collaborating together. And if you think of that as a pool of problem solvers, people that can create this value, then you're going to be much, much more sensitive to the early signals. You're actually going to think of the organization as this, I call it not a workforce and not a network, but a work net, as a network of people that are all helping to create that value. And so if you do things like use mentorships and apprenticeships to bring younger people into the organization, you do more project-based work so that you can actually have more people doing the work of the organizations. You focus on entrepreneurship, as Irina was talking about, where you are continually empowering people to become problem solvers to identify new problems. You're going to be far more aware of what those early signals are. And then if you have a process of co-creating that value, you can actually encourage people and empower them to channel their energies to be able to insulate the organization against a lot of that exponential change.
I would like to add and echo that that Gary said. My own experience is that you you get those insight and early signals by co-creating with others. If you're collaborating with universities, with startup companies, for example, you might get early signals that you would not have before. And it's usually outside of your own industry. So it's not within your own industry where you already have an intelligent, some kind of unit for intelligence, looking at your competitors and your market and your customers. You need to go outside of that. So Gary, one more question to you. What should workers do to ensure they will continually have a relevant skill set? And what is a relevant skill set? You said that there's a lack of 21st century skills.
Yeah.
What is that?
So first off, for each of us as individuals, we didn't talk about much of our histories, but I was actually trained as a career counselor when I was 19 years old. I sort of fell into the family business. It turned out that my father was a recovering minister who wrote the world's career manual, a book called What Color Is Your Parachute? And so I was trained in his methods very early on. And so we find that there are some characteristics, or there's some superpowers that each of us need to develop if we're going to continually have a relevant skill set. The first is a growth mindset. As Dr. Carol Dweck talks about in her book, as Irina said, in terms of being a lifelong learner, we need to continually have the mindset that we can continue to grow. Secondly is we found that the people that tend to be able to continually adapt to exponential change, they tend to have a North Star or a Southern Cross, something that guides them in their work, in their career, in their lives, something that fascinates them, that they're attracted to. Third, it's always important to be aware of what's happening in markets, where the opportunity to use your skill set might be. But increasingly, you only have to get a job for one person. So increasingly, you just have to develop a skill set that allows you to be able to be continually adaptive. And in my book, I call that PACE. Problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy. And so I think of that as that 21st century skill set. I call these flex skills, but this PACE skill set is the capacity to be able to continually solve problems, either as an entrepreneur inside an organization or as an entrepreneur external to the organization.
And Annika, would you mind if I just chimed in and added something to that? Thank you, Gary. That was a wonderful response to that question. And I thought just add a couple of really practical ways that people can do that is by looking at their core skill set and then looking at what might be some adjacent skills to their core skill set that they could constantly be evolving into. So if someone's really great at Excel, for example, being adding data analysis into it. If someone is a scientist or an engineer and they deal with complex information, perhaps adding the skill set of data visualization, being able to tell stories with their data. So it's about always looking for those complementary and adjacent skills that people can step into. And the other thing is to be very, very conscious about simultaneously growing both our hard and soft skills. Now, a lot of people have an issue with the term soft skills because it tends to diminish their importance somewhat, but we often focus on people's technical skills. So they do a lot of professional development in that area, but there's so much of the messaging that we're seeing now is saying that soft skills, all of those things like problem finding and resourcefulness and problem solving and creativity and being future focused and growth mindset, those soft skills are now more important than they have ever been before. And then people can take those complementary skills, their skill development, and look for stretch projects. In other words, and this goes with the growth mindset, find projects to work on, internally within the organization, work with people who are more experienced, so that you can actually grow your skills in that kind of a context. So those are all some really practical things that people can do to keep their skills constantly evolving and relevant for the 21st century for as long as they need to. Right.
No, it's an excellent addition to that. So I would like to go over to Dr. Mansoor. You had your hand raised. Did you want to maybe comment on the previous? speech.
Yes, please, if I may, because I would like just to share with the audience as well, with the panel, my own experience at Hamdan bin Mohamed Smart University in creating that particular momentum within the culture itself. And I think one of the things that we have done, because this university is we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We were the first in the Arab world to go online in education. And we started from zero because we hadn't have anything to benchmark against at that time in 2002. So we created a set of values for the organization to whom it's important to understand within the workers, the faculty, the admin staff in the university, as well as the learners, the customers as well. We set out our 5 points and dimensions of our values. One, we are learner-centric, and that is the core of any smart learning. The second was about game changer. If you are a faculty joining HBMSU, then you have to have that mindset of the game changing in higher education. Mm-hmm. The third was together we grow, how we are going to be able to partner with the public and private sector as a higher education institution. The fourth was result oriented. We are not just only with a gimmick of words and all these things. So we need to be having something tangible. The fifth one was fueling innovation. Mm. And I think these 5, a set of 5 values, it actually created that momentum. Today, I'm very proud to say that I have at HBMSU a team of wolves, because they are all, passionate about creating, finding the problem, solving the problem, and to be able to be pace setters within the Arab geography that we are currently.
So may I ask then, Dr. Mansoor, because this is also a question that we got in the Q&A. If you are to transform your higher education, your university, towards more of what I understand it, a digitalized business model, where you seem to be today, how much can you reuse your resources and skills from sort of the traditional university? Can you do this in the same sort of context, or do you need a new set of skills, a new type of resources and people?
Not at all. And I think it's a good question. What we have developed currently is 2 dimensions of the quality, because what matters today in the world of education is people are talking about, their concern is all about quality, dimension. We have 2 levels of this thing to be able to share with the other institutions as well, if they wish. One, the readiness to be digitally transformed. How we're going to do the digital transformation. So how are the measure of the quality standards to be able to measure my readiness to be able to be transformed? The second part is the quality measures on the output of an online education system, which is the learner's experience and what it matters all. And those 2 dimensions, I think we can share it today. The dimension number 1, which is the readiness, we have developed in a research project with the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, right in the beginning of 2010. And we have the second version in 2021. I think the measures and the standards criteria for readiness of digital transformation and to be ready. And the second one is, of course, the benchmarking set data that we have launched along with the international organizations as well as universities around the world. We have currently almost 37. We started with 5 and 5 other institutions online. We created that momentum of standards that to be globally usable and implementable. And just a few months ago, we shared this experience as well in the UNESCO conference, which was handled with the higher education in Barcelona, in Spain. So I think we can share these sets of standards that it will facilitate for transformation. But in this case, I think I should say also, there are, for this early signals, those people who are want to be digitally transformed, want to be going to the smart learning, online learning. I think they have to work around 4 major dimensions and characteristics. And those characteristics, by the way, the 4 pivoting points are: first, the learners. We must understand that the role of learners are not the students anymore. They will become, and I think a couple of you, like Arina and Anika, I think you mentioned about the lifelong learner, and then Gary as well. So this role is totally different from being a recipient of knowledge. We're going to go to the co-creation of knowledge. And believe me, Anika, when I met every year the learners on our university, I said, you guys in this university are in the driving seat. The first question comes from the learners: if we are in the driving seat, what the hell the administration and faculty are doing then? I said, well, we are your Google map. And do you believe that the Google map can function without you entering the direction? Never. And sometimes we outsmart the Google map because we know the road better than they do, but we face a problem that road is under construction and we didn't know about it, and Google knew about it. So we are the wisdom, we are the faculty and the administrator. So I think the learner's role completely changed. And I think when learner roles change, and I think Professor Irina as well, she mentioned about democratization of learning. That is where the voice of customers, that is where the learner centricity is all about. And I think this is what it differentiates what is going to be coming up in early signals for educators around the world. The second is the faculty. The faculty, I think, we don't adopt anything in FMSU called something called teaching. It's about mentoring and coaching. And I think that is the most difficult task that ever any faculty can have, because it exposes the capability of development in the mindset. We don't have ready-made menus for it. And if the smart learning is all about individualization, then it becomes much more harder to the faculty to be trained in the same way. So it needs kind of understanding much more. The third component is the curriculum. The curriculum is available online, and I think that itself has lots of aspects. The fourth part of it, I think, is the learning environment. Today, the space and time are irrelevant, and when it comes to be in that way, then I think when I was doing some of the promotion on online learning in our geography in the Arab world, I was telling people in 2003 at that time, I said, well, don't you think that shopping is essential? They say, yes. I think, what do you think that shopping malls as brick and mortar does anymore? I said, no, it's not. That's for 2003. I told them, if the banking is essential, they said, yes. Are the banks as brick and mortar, essential anymore? They said, no. So if that is the trend, so trend would be schooling is essential, Anika. Schools are not. Learning is essential. Universities are not. And I think that's, that influences lots of changes in the higher education, which is going to be coming up in I would not say a couple of years, but a few years ahead, much more sooner than we anticipate.
Right. That is a question, right? I mean, we're all waiting for it, but when will it actually happen? When will we, tip over that point so we actually have more online?
Because it's still the question of education is. I remember just only in the history, the Wright brothers, when they invented the flight in early 19th century, 1902, I think the first aircraft which, crossed over Atlantic, it was in 1928 or 19, yes, something like that. And I think at that time, one of the newspapers in the United States, they said that with a headline, "The Adventurers." And I think people who are actually putting forward for the online learning, I think a smart learning for tomorrow will become a must for the world. And I think that is the answer to the question that I have already proposed in my introductory talk.
I would like to go to Irina. So are there early signals emerging in relation to the future of entrepreneurship?
Okay. So yes, I would say that there is an interesting evolution that's starting to take place now, where the word intrapreneurship is evolving into the word intrapreneurialism. And you might have noticed that I tend to talk about intrapreneurialism when I can, rather than entrepreneurship. And the reason for that is this: when you use the word entrepreneurship, most of the time it refers to programs that organizations have running internally. So people are often brought out of their substantive role, they go into an accelerator or an incubator where they work for 3 months on a particular project, on a particular product, goes through stage gates, then it goes to market, it's tested, etc. And that's great, or that's wonderful. And organizations should certainly do that. But realistically, only a very small number of people in a large organization ever have the opportunity to do something like that. You know, what about the other thousands of people in the organization whose idea didn't get selected to go into the incubator, into the entrepreneurship program? And that's entrepreneurialism, which is more general, it's broader, it's something that everyone can do, it's a state of being, it's not something that focuses on a particular project, but rather on a way of approaching work. And everyone in the organization can do that. Everyone can say, well, I can be entrepreneurial in the role that I have. I can look for new problems to solve. I can look for ways of creating value for customers, and then I can just do it. You know, I don't have to wait till I get permission. If it's to make things better, I don't need permission. If it's part of my remit, let me just do it. And so that's the difference between entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism, you know, something we do versus something we be, a state of mind. And I'm starting to notice that there are more and more articles, and the way the contributions are coming through into this space are beginning to talk more about the ism rather than the ship version. And I'm really happy about that, because I believe that this is something that needs to enfranchise everyone, to be inclusive, to give everyone the opportunity of having their ideas get some oxygen, and being able to have that sense of satisfaction of being able to create value and bring that higher sense of purpose to their work. So that's what I would see as an early signal for the evolution of entrepreneurship into entrepreneurialism.
We have a number of questions here that is touching on a very important topic. And I think we all would sort of feel that as well. It has with the relevant skill set to do, Gary, and it's about, you know, in this kind of time of crisis or a black swan effect, how leaders can, you know, should reuse the resources they have. And it's also combined with another question that we usually tend to talk about, like younger people, when we talk about those new skill sets. What about the middle-aged, the elderly in an organization? You know, will they just be sort of not relevant? Or how should we think there? I mean, we have a lot of people in organizations today that, of course, can we retrain? Can we make sure that we can reuse those resources, so it's not just the young one that should take over everything?
Gary?
I was actually just composing a response to Samira. So, a couple of things. So, we know from literally 50 years of work with What Color Is Your Parachute, how individuals, how each of us as individuals, how we go through career change, how we make these decisions about our lives. And you're right that in many cases, Samir's right in that in many cases, organizations over-index on young workers, and it's the older workers that often have tremendous experience that the organization can more effectively leverage. There's several things that are really important. The first is that the organization needs to actually accept the responsibility, because many organizations around the world before the pandemic didn't actually see this need, that they were the ones who actually had to step up to help develop these skill sets. And Irina is exactly right. Both I call them flex skills, not soft skills, and no skills, knowledge skills, not hard skills. But the basic premise is yes, the organization has to step up to helping people to learn these skills, but it has to first help people to be infected with the love of wanting to continue to learn. An older worker who's done the same thing for decades is often less ready to be able to make that shift. And so by helping them to develop a growth mindset, develop that North Star or Southern Cross that I was talking about, but also the organization itself has to use many of the techniques that both of you and Annika were talking about in terms of empowering individuals to be able to solve problems and to make the organization. One of the mindsets that we talk about is skills as an enterprise resource. The old role of management has to go away. I call it a team guide. You can't see any worker as a wholly owned resource. They have to be skills that are available. So you have to have enterprise skills databases. If you're a large organization, you have to have enterprise skills marketplaces where projects are posted. And the more you think about these as ways to make individuals within the organization more agile and nimble, the organization itself will become more nimble. And then to the point of the sensor network, the understanding those early signals, what we find most organizations, one of the biggest things that they run into, it's not that they didn't see things coming, is they didn't prioritize them correctly or appropriately. They didn't have scenario planning to be able to incorporate these possibilities. And they often didn't take risks. That is, they didn't take nimble groups of people to focus on, if that could be a possible future, what would our organization do? There are some organizations, one of our clients is called PAX8. They were a distributed organization within 36 hours of deciding they couldn't go into the office. And there are other organizations that still haven't figured out this remote work thing and may not for quite some time. So the more you can actually think of your workers as being intelligent problem solvers, teams as pools of problem solvers, the far more nimble and flexible your organization is going to be.
Right. So we have just 4 minutes left, and we had a question about, while talking about early signals, what are the prevention measures and why to wait for crisis to happen? And of course, I think we all are behind that. You don't wait for a crisis to happen. You develop your skills to sense those early signals better. Anyone that would like to jump on that to say just a quick answer or thought on how can you trigger that skill set to actually sense better what's going on? Any concrete example what you can do? Yeah, we have Dr. Mansoor.
Yeah, yes, I think it's not just only we to be faced with the quick problems. I think we need also to become a learning organization. I think organizations around the world been taught a lesson by the pandemic, which closed everything, including the education and other parts of the business as well. I think the pandemic has put all leaderships across the organizations, education is inclusive as well, to a very harsh experience. And I think those will win for and will sense the early signals. Those who are actually, their organization were well equipped and well agile to be able to learn from 2 years of, I would call 2 years of experience. So I think it's not just a matter of how to face any new things. And I think the lessons should be learned from what we had all through during the pandemic, all sectors of business.
Thank you. So I would like each of you to give a 15-second sort of last advice to the participant that attend today. Who wants to start to give one sort of thing to remember and to pinpoint for 2023?
I don't mind jumping in first, Annika. So very simple takeaway. Your deliverable as somebody who leads in an organization is not an answer. It's not to come up with the ways that the rules of work and your organization are going to function today. It's a process. It's to co-create a process that involves a wide range of stakeholders, because your policies and approaches a year from now are going to be totally different. So you need to continually think of yourself as co-creating those rules on an ongoing basis. And I guarantee you'll be a more agile organization.
Okay, so we heard that the co-create process and also co-create the rules that will change dynamically. Okay, Dr. Mansoor.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Irina, no, we can take
I'll go next. 15 seconds.
Yep.
The most important thing is for organizations to liberate the talent which is already within their ranks, and they have got all the resources they need to be able to face whatever challenges will come their way if they turn their workforce, or however else you like to describe that, from employees into entrepreneurs. They will be well set up for the future, and they'll be able to manage any disruption and rise to any challenge if they can tap into that talent within their workforce.
Okay, so we have co-create processes, we have workforce is going from employees to entrepreneurs, and then Dr. Mansoor, 15 seconds, even less.
Yes, I call upon my colleagues and fellows, academicians and educators around the world to have a paradigm shift and to have a total transformational thinking about education overall, including the higher education as well. I think the signals are very clear. The education arena will not be the playground that we used to have then. I think we need, like Irina said, an entrepreneurialism in terms of the faculties and in the higher education staff to be able to absorb the changes which is coming up in the near future.
And with that, we want to say thank you, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar. We will come back to you. Some ask for the presentation material. We will ask TIBAI about the policy around that. But thank you for participating. Thank you for being here. Stay safe, and thank you for now. Bye.
And Annika, thank you for guiding the conversation so skillfully.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you very much.
You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.